Well, as you all know, I'm Phil Bolsta, and we're here tonight to launch my new book, Through God's Eyes, Finding Peace and Purpose in a Troubled World. You know, it's funny, but when people find out I've written a few books, they often treat me differently, like I'm somebody special. I know better. You know, ask any writer, musician, artist, and they'll tell you that their best work comes not from them, but through them. And anytime my ego tries to tell me differently, that's when I run into trouble. And keeping your ego in check is especially important when you're trying to live a spiritual life, because you won't make any progress until you learn the value of humility. Fortunately, life never seems to run out of opportunities to remind us to be humble. Case in point, my first book, 60 Seconds, One Moment Changes Everything. It's a collection of 45 life-changing, uplifting stories from prominent people I interviewed, like Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, Carolyn Mace, Neil Donald Walsh, and others. And it's also available tonight after the reading. Well, it's been translated into 4 languages, the last of which was Portuguese. And I got an email from my agent telling me the publisher was afraid I'd be upset, but they couldn't use my name on the cover of the book in Brazil. Turns out that in Portuguese, the L in Bolsta is silent, which leaves Bosta, which means excrement. I thought it was hilarious. I mean, what do I care what my name is on the cover of a book in Brazil? So if you happen to be in Brazil and you happen to go into a bookstore and you happen to pick up a copy of 60 Segundos, you'll see that the name on the cover is Philip Charles. That's my first and middle name. Well, I was telling that story to a friend of mine from Iran, and she told me that in Farsi, Philip means elephant. So of course my sister started calling me elephant excrement. And it's a lot of fun when I meet people from Brazil, which I have very often out in Encinitas, California, where I'm living much of the time. At one function, I met a guy named Claudio from Brazil. And we had name tags on, so I covered up mine and I said, "Hi, I'm Phil. I wrote a book that was translated into Portuguese." And they couldn't use my name on the cover. And he said, "Why?" And I just dropped my hand, and he looked at my name and burst out laughing. And he said, "Oh, I got to get a picture of this." So he took out his iPhone, took a picture of my name tag. So believe me, when you're a laughingstock in an entire country, it's easy to stay humble. Now, in case you're wondering why I called the book Through God's Eyes, and even in case you're not, please allow me to read just a few chapters from the front of the book. The title, Through God's Eyes, reflects a pivotal moment of personal enlightenment. At a 1998 weekend workshop, Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe, founder of the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism, shared a life-changing story with his students. He said that after watching a TV nature program in which a lion savagely ripped apart a gazelle, he had been distraught. Retreating into meditation, he implored God, "How could you allow such carnage and tragedy to exist?" He told us that the response he received humbled him and restored his faith in divine intelligence. "I felt and saw through inner revelation how this incident was experienced from a higher level as pure love, and that it was beautiful beyond description." Ibrahim explained that this world may appear cruel and harsh to our unenlightened eyes, but even the brutality inherent in the animal kingdom has meaning, purpose, and a stark beauty all its own. Indeed, looking through God's eyes, we see that simply by living our lives, we all serve each other in ways both simple and profound. From that day on, I challenged myself to see the world through God's eyes, to the extent that I could, of course, so that I too could witness every moment unfolding with beauty, love, and perfection. Granted, that is much easier said than done, especially on days when I am the gazelle. I found that the more I train myself to view the world in this way, the more peaceful and grounded I become. It then becomes easier to follow the core teaching of the ancient wisdom presented in these pages. With love and devotion, align your will with divine will, and be a source of love, hope, and healing energy to all who cross your path. What I'll be doing tonight is talking about 4 spiritual principles. I'll share a story that shows how each principle relates to daily life, and then do a quick reading from the book. We'll do 4 such excerpts. Helping me in the reading is the lovely and talented Erin, who also happens to be my daughter. And because of the nature of the format of the book, which alternates my narrative with inspiring quotes from other people, I will read the narrative, Erin will read the quote. To make things smooth tonight, she won't read the name of the person who wrote the quote. And the narrative and quotes throughout the book flow in such a way that they build on and support and flow into each other for a seamless reading experience. Now, the first principle we're talking about is surrender. When you surrender to life, to the universe, to God, whatever you wish to call it, you're more in sync with the rhythms of life. You start noticing connections and patterns that you may not have noticed before. I'd like to share a story to begin with from my first book, 60 Seconds. I'm a certified massage therapist, and for years I did volunteer massage for Allina Hospice. I massage hospice patients at the end of their life. And about 7 years ago, I got a call from Ann Lutkin, who was the volunteer coordinator for Allina Hospice. She told me that they had a 59-year-old man who was suffering from lung cancer. He was a non-smoker, but he was having trouble breathing, and he would panic. So his wife thought some massage would calm him. I said, sure, what's his name? And she said, Charles Petuznik. And I froze. And I thought, oh my God, that's gotta be Chuck. You see, 22 years earlier, I was working for an investment newsletter that was run by, let's say, I'll call him a volatile entrepreneur. He used the newsletter really just as a vehicle to tout the investment value of rare coins. And we enlisted the help of Dorsey and Whitney, a law firm in the cities, to approve the text of the newsletter. Well, Chuck Petuznik was a lawyer assigned to our account. One newsletter talked about a story in which we acquired a large collection of coins from a collector out west. And Chuck asked me on the phone about that story. He wanted me to check on it, so I told him I would. Well, I found out that the story was fabricated. I called Chuck back. It was all marketing. Called him back and told him that. And he said, hey, if you're going to tell these Little Red Riding Hood stories, I can't be a party to that. And he resigned on the spot. That act of integrity impressed me. You know how it is with some people you meet. Once in a while, something clicks, and you're in their orbit, and they're in yours. I think I only met Chuck once, talked to him a handful of times, but the impression he made on me never faded. In fact, it got stronger over time. Whenever I'd hear a conversation about corporate attorneys or saw a magazine article, best lawyers in the Twin Cities, Chuck's name would flash in neon letters in my mind. I didn't know why, I didn't know when, but somehow I sensed that our paths would cross again. So when Ann called, everything tumbled into place, and I felt a sense of peace come over me, because I knew that it had come time to complete the circle of energy that connected us. I drove to Chuck's house and was let in by a family friend and brought to his bedroom. He was very weak, had to stay in bed, but he was mentally alert. He couldn't talk very well. He was rather faint, but he was all there. So I was alone with him, and I just started reaching behind his shoulders and neck and massaging him, and he would be saying things like, "Oh, that feels incredible." He really appreciated it. After about 5 minutes, I said to him, "You know, Chuck, you and I go way back." And he kind of cocked his head and smiled, kind of motioned me to continue, and I told him that I had worked for the Money Advocate, and 22 years earlier he had resigned the account over the phone. He remembered, and he whispered, "Tell me that story." So I did. And we talked about the value of integrity. And we talked about how important it was to treat everyone you meet with love and compassion. And I told him that by his example, he had inspired me later, years later, to live a life of integrity no matter what the cost. Everything about that day felt right. Spent over an hour with Chuck, and I told him I'd be back soon. Well, 2 days later, on a Saturday, I went back to see him. But he wasn't doing well. He was in a lot of pain, so he was drugged up, and he wasn't in any condition to talk. So I just reached behind him again and was massaging his neck and shoulders and arms. And at one point, I just whispered behind him, "God bless you, my friend." And I didn't think he would hear me, and if he did, it wouldn't register. Well, he did hear me, and he just kind of grunted like, "Huh?" Like, "What did you say?" So I said it louder, "God bless you, my friend." And he just kind of grunted and seemed content. And at one point, he haltingly lifted up his arm and swiped at his nose with a finger, and then his arm dropped heavily to his side again. He had breathing tubes in his nose, so there's blood around his nose. And he had blood smeared around his finger. I picked up his finger, took a Kleenex, and was wiping the blood from his finger. And as I did that, I marveled at the twists and turns that life can bring. I mean, 22 years earlier, I was just a young kid starting in business. And I looked up to a savvy corporate attorney, 11 years my senior, and now here I was comforting him in his final hours. Just by being who he was, he made me a better man, deepened my faith, and provided me with a glimpse into the mysteries of the universe. The moments I spent by his bedside were sacred, and I'll cherish them always.